Hello there and a very good evening, and you're joining a special edition of Vantage Point. It's the 5th year anniversary of our political discussion program, Vantage Point. For over 5 years, we've been discussing the issues that matter to you and the country alike, both locally and internationally. And for the past 5 years, there's been one constant in this program, and that person has been seated opposite to this seat, and that is our guest tonight as well, Dr. Dayan Jayatilaka. A very good evening, Doctor.
Good evening, Zulfik. Happy to be here, especially on this anniversary.
Doctor, you've been here for 5 long years on that seat with us, discussing all the issues in the country and in the world that affect us most importantly. How does it feel being here for 5 years?
Well, it's literally not the seat, because I remember when we started off, there was this high bar type table.
Yes.
We kicked off the Sinhalese program Siti Jaya simultaneously with the English one, Vantage Point. And my first anchor was Mahina Bongso. She picked up awards for that show, the best political talk show of that year, and it won the same award the next year. I can't remember whether it was Mahina or the producer who picked up the award. And after Mahina, it was Nadeem Majid, and now you. In between, Stephanie Lazarus, and very briefly, Azra
San, we had her very briefly.
Yes, and she was quite vibrant too. So I've enjoyed the show. It's been great to have the opportunity to present an analysis every fortnight for 5 years. And I'm thankful to Sirasa and its chairperson, Mr. Kiri Raja Mahendran, and our friend Shivan Daniel for providing this space for discussion and debate.
And I believe, Doctor, our viewers too would have loved our program for the past 5 years and many more to come. And to kick off today's program, let's talk about the most pressing matter right now, the opposition leader. There's been discussions going on all over between the joint opposition, the opposition itself, and then sometimes with the government as well about the position of the opposition leader. Doctor, in your view, what is happening here in this country, especially with the opposition leader's post?
Well, I have seen something of this sort in the late 1970s and 80s, and I'm not sure that the lessons have been internalized. Now, you might know, you wouldn't didn't become the leader of the opposition in 77, and that's because she didn't get as many seats as Mr. Apapile Amithalingam of the Tamil United Liberation Front. But nobody questioned whether Mr. Amithalingam should be the leader of the opposition because he had more seats. It's as simple as that. I mean, there were those who detested him, like Cyril Matthew, who was a Sinhalese ultra-nationalist minister of President Jawaharlal's government. But nobody ever questioned as to whether Mr. Amithalingam should be the leader of the opposition or not. He lost that post because he and his party decided after 1983 not to accept a new piece of legislation that under which all MPs have to swear an oath upholding allegiance to a single sovereign united Sri Lanka. So they refused to do that and they lost their seats. But as I said, nobody thought that Mrs. Bananayake should be the leader of the opposition at that time in 77 because she didn't have as many seats as Mr. Amithalingam. So ethnicity is not what it's about, arithmetic is what it is about, and still remains so. Now today, Mr. Sambandhan doesn't have arithmetic on his side, unlike Mr. Amithalingam. There is a counter-argument that the joint opposition has the SLFP, quite a few SLFP people, maybe about 50 SLFP people with it or more. But the SLFP is also in government, and therefore it can't be in two places at the same time. Now, that may or may not be true. What I do want to say is that there is a precedent of such a thing happening, and each faction being recognized as being with the opposition and with the government respectively. At that time when it happened, nobody said, look, part of you are in government, part of you are in the opposition, you better make your minds up. Now, I'm talking about 1972, when Madam Baranaka was Prime Minister. The Communist Party, which was much stronger than it is now, it was a powerful component of the United Front coalition government, split. And each side had a very prominent personality, prominent not only nationally but internationally, because the communist movement was an international movement. So with the government, you had the Minister of Housing, the Honorable Peter Kenneman. And going into the opposition, you had Dr. S.A. Wickramasinghe from Mathura, who was senior to Peter Kenneman in the formation of the communist movement. And with him, with Dr. Wickramasinghe, was also the rising star, the young superstar of the left movement in Sri Lanka at that time, Sarath Muttettuwegama. Now, the party paper, or the pro-party newspaper, the Atta went with the opposition. At that time, there was nobody saying, hey, look, Peter Kenneman is in government, he is the Minister of Housing, we can't recognize you in the opposition. Nor vice versa. They didn't tell Peter, you better decide what you want to do with your out. And nobody told Dr. Wickramasinghe, you decide whether you're here or there. In the event, the party reunified, but that is because Moscow put pressure. It wasn't something that was done by the local parliament. So we do have a precedent. Now, it's arguable that that precedent was wrong, and what is being said now is right. I don't want to get into that. What I do want to establish is that there was a precedent. This is not new. And the practice went the other way, not the way it seems to be going now. The second point I want to make is that if one is concerned, as I certainly am, about the rise of ultra-right extremist movements of a Sinhalese, Buddhist, ultra-nationalist character, just as I'm concerned about its Tamil equivalent in the north, then the thing to do is to strengthen, not to weaken, the established democratic opposition. In this case, it would be the opposition that is led in parliament by Dinesh Gunawardena in parliament. Though its prominent and uncontested national leader happens to be the former president Rajapaksa. But Dinesh is the man in parliament, as you can see when you turn on your television set every day. So, those who do not give the democratic opposition and its parliamentary leader, Mr. Dinesh Gunawardena, their due political space and status, are taking the risk precisely of the extremists, the alt-right, the far-right, the new right, saying, look, the democratic game is weighted against you. That's why we need somebody from outside politics, and we need ex-military people. It's okay, be like a Hitler if you want to, and change things. Now, we experienced something similar in the late 1970s. The threat didn't come from the alt-right at that time, but from the far framing it and banning it as responsible for July 83, which was a lie. But with the rise of the JVP, one of the problems that the system had was that Madam Baranaka had been deprived of her civic rights by a special presidential commission. Now, as I said, nobody objected when Amithalingam became the leader of the opposition because he had more seats than Mrs. B. But once he resigned from parliament, Madam Baranaka should have naturally been the leader of the opposition, which would have helped stabilize the situation and take the steam out of the JVP, which was rising. instead, her civic rights had been removed, so she could not lead the opposition either. What the Americans did was, the American ambassador at that time, Professor Howard Riggins, who had written a book on Sri Lanka 20 years ago called Dilemmas of a Modern Nation in 1960, he told President Jayawardena, you have to restore Mrs. Bandanayaka's civic rights and give her the leadership of the opposition, which President Jayawardena did. But it was 1985-86. The JVP was already uncorked, and that move was so belated it didn't work. You couldn't stop the extremists.
Doctor, those are some very interesting thoughts that we are going down memory lane as well. But we'll be right back after this short commercial break. Welcome back to Vantage Point. Joining me today as well is Dr. Dayanjaya, and we were discussing the post of opposition leader in Parliament with a little bit of history as well. Doctor, I apologize for interrupting you earlier before the break, but let us continue from what the American ambassador back then said on Madam Bandanayaka.
Yeah, he told President Jayawardena, because he had written Jaya's biography, and he said, look, you know, you're making a big mistake. She's your rival, but she's a Democrat. And by depriving her of her civic rights and keeping her out of the game, you are in fact strengthening the extremists who don't believe in the system. So, right now the same mistake may be happening, which is only encouraging the rise of the ex-military alt-right in Sri Lanka. And if you deprive somebody like Dinesh Gunawardena of his due status on the grounds that you need a new constitution and you need Mr. Sambandhan as the leader of the opposition when he doesn't have even a fraction, not even 1/5 of the numbers that Dinesh commands in Parliament, then you're setting yourself up for a world of pain politically, because the response or the reaction to the Constitution will be doubly negative if it's seen to prop up in place somebody who doesn't have the numbers that the southern-based opposition has. It doesn't help the project of a new constitution either. You know, it doesn't help it. It only strengthens the alt-right.
So, Doctor, is it the Speaker's job to avoid a political whirlwind from happening?
Well, the Speaker has to take into account the recommendation sent by the relevant political party. Now, whether he's bound by that, I don't know. I'm not an expert on parliamentary procedure. You know, I never wanted to get into Parliament, so there's a reason for that, and I don't know too much about the actual functioning in terms of precedents and traditions. The ball seems to be in the Speaker's court, but we don't know what's in the letter that has been sent to him.
By Dinesh Gunawardena and his...
no, by the UPFA.
UPFA.
So, if Dinesh is not made the leader of the opposition, I think it's going to hurt stability and the system. Not that people are going to hit the street, but it's going to strengthen those who are outside the system and those who are not politicians, who are not parliamentarians.
So the balance will be a bit off shift.
Extremism will benefit. There will be no beneficiaries apart from extremism. If no change is made and the reason is we have to maintain the status quo, people who do that are only undermining the status quo and making the end result more radical, more extreme, more militant ideologically than it would otherwise be. It's not a smart thing to do.
Very interesting, Doctor. Doctor, before we move into our next point, since we're on the point of Parliament, I'd like to pitch in this tiny question. What are your thoughts on increasing the salaries of MPs?
No. I don't think the optics are right at all. I don't think.
Like this, when people are being asked to tighten their belts, it seems quite unfair.
It doesn't look right.
And then, Doctor, now moving to our next point, it's about the presidential candidacy. Now, all of a sudden, because of this topic of the opposition leader in parliament, the topic of the presidential candidacy has seemed to be a bit under the covers. Is there any reason for this, Doctor? Are they keeping low because of some particular reason?
Well, I think there's a link, though it's not an obvious link, because if Dinesh Gunawardene had been or were to be made the leader of the parliamentary opposition, then he would be well positioned to be the opposition's presidential candidate.
Right.
Those who are stopping this are actually weakening that potential candidacy and widening the opening for somebody else whom they may not like as much as they like Dinesh. So,
by somebody you mean
but logic
from the former president's
Gotabaya. For GR, for Gotabaya.
For Gotabaya. So in the event, Doctor, now with this plan that is in place to strengthen Dinesh Gunawardene in Parliament, in the event he is strengthened, what would happen to Gotabaya?
Well, if he's strengthened by making him the leader of the opposition, I think it will help his candidacy. If he is not, he can still be the candidate because he has been, in effect, the leader of the opposition, as we can see every day on television. I mean, look at the number of streets in this town named after members of his family. Robert Gunawardene Mawatha, Philip Gunawardene Mawatha, the Hyde Park is Philip Gunawardene Park, Vivian Gunawardene, this, that and the other. This is an important political family like the Rajapaksas and the Bandaranayakas. Dinesh himself was recognized as a party leader and an ally of Mrs. Bandaranaike. Even when ex-President Rajapaksa was an up-and-coming figure in the Sri Lanka Freedom Party in the late 80s, Dinesh was already, as a party leader, treated as an ally of Madam Bandaranaike's around 1986-87. So we are talking about somebody who should be an automatic choice as the presidential candidate in the event that Mahinda Rajapaksa cannot contest. But to talk instead of Gotabaya, I've always found this a travesty. And now there's resistance. There's Kumar Welgam, a very senior SLFP MP, openly protesting about this. There's Vasudev Nanakara, also a veteran, who has been critical. And most recently, you have the interview given to C.A. Chandraprema of the Sunday Island by an important player in Tamil politics, Douglas Devananda, who has played his way back into the game by doing quite well during the local government elections. There was a fascinating interview that Chandraprema, who is also the author of the book Gota's War, had with Devananda. And Devananda says that he's asked, are you against Gotabaya Rajapaksa? And Devananda says, I won't say yes and I won't say no. And he goes on to say something fascinating. It's fascinating because he's describing an event, and in fact a small circle in which I was when this, not when the conversation took place, I didn't overhear the conversation, but we were together, and Devananda has now put it out in the public domain. This was on the 91st anniversary of the founding of the Chinese People's Liberation Army. It was at the Shangri-La Hotel. And there was a moment where former President Rajapaksa, Minister Madhuma Bandara, former Defense Secretary Gotabaya Rajapaksa, Mr. Sambandhan of the TNA, Douglas Devananda and my wife and myself, we were together in a semicircle and we were chatting. Now, it was very interesting because at one point it seems, I was not there at that moment, I probably went to get some food. Douglas and Gotabaya had a friendly political disputation. Very friendly, very cordial, because I could see the body language. Everybody was very friendly there. Douglas has now made it public, so I don't mind sharing it with you because some of you may have read it. Douglas says that Gotabaya said, are you supporting us? Will you support us or won't you support us? And Douglas had said, well, I have no problem with the former president, but I find it very difficult I would find it very difficult to support you because of what you have recently said. You had a briefing for the Tamil media and you have said that if you were to be the president of Sri Lanka or the presidential candidate, that your answer to the political problems of the Tamils would be economic development and economic freedom, economic empowerment. I'm sorry, I cannot agree with you. The Tamils have a political problem as well. That is at the heart of the issue. It's not economics. Economics is another issue. It's a byproduct. And I am the only politician who's willing to settle on the basis of the 13th Amendment. Mr. Sambandhan wants federalism. Mr. Vigneshwaran wants an even more radical kind of federalism. Mr. Gagan Ponnambalam wants some kind of federalism that is close to a separate are not for that. You haven't even mentioned the 13th Amendment. You're not committed to that at all. And you're talking about economic development instead of a political reform. I'm sorry, I can't agree with that. That has not been my stand for long. I mean, from the beginning, from the time of the Accord. And I can't sell that to my people. So you cannot count on my support. Now, if Gotabaya cannot persuade Douglas Devananda, and if he didn't know when he made that statement that he would not be able to persuade even Douglas, who's a moderate, who has worked with every president from President Premadasa right down to President Sirisena, then we are talking about a candidate who can conceivably win on the basis of a pan-singular vote. But from the morning after, he's going to have a divided nation.
Some interesting thoughts there, Doctor, for all of us to think about. We'll be back right after this short commercial break. Well, we had some food for thought there before the commercial break with Dr. Dan Jathalika. Doctor, let's shift gears over to one of our friendly countries, Pakistan.
Yes, indeed. Very exciting.
Pakistan has a new Prime Minister. Imran Khan, former cricketing legend Imran Khan, is now officially the Prime Minister of Pakistan. And one of the most interesting things that he has done is keep his cabinet really small. And one member in this cabinet is of particular interest, Doctor. Shall we talk about her? Shireen Nazari, the new Foreign Minister of Pakistan. It seems, Doctor, that Imran Khan is making the wise choices in appointing those who are suitable to those positions.
Yes, and I must share with you that I've been a guest of Dr. Shireen.
That's wonderful,
Nazari.
Doctor.
Yeah, I must dust off my photograph and go and give it to be framed. What happened was that former at the time Foreign Minister, Honorable Lakshman Kadargama, sent a very small team in February 2005 to Islamabad to study the excellent system of think tanks, foreign affairs and strategic studies think tanks that Pakistan has. And the team included, well, it was a very small team, the former High Commissioner, Sri Lankan High Commissioner, former Army Commander, General Jerry De Silva, former senior diplomat Kalyananda Godage, and myself. So our hosts were the leading Islamabad think tank. There are many think tanks, and that's why we were sent to talk to every one of them, our small unit. But our main host, I was at that time on the board, the board of directors, board of management of the Bananaka Center for International Studies, chaired by Lakshman Kadargama at that time, and on the editorial board of the journal. So the head of the leading foreign policy and strategic studies think tank in Islamabad was Dr. Shireen Nazari. She was our host. And we had many meetings, dinners, lunches, and so on. Wonderful personality, Zulfiq. She's got a postgraduate qualifications from the West.
I see.
And she's, very articulate lady. very strong views, brilliant, very strong, very controversial views. Even at the time when she was heading this government think tank, this was under President Musharraf, by the way. Some would call her anti-Indian or anti-American, but she wasn't. She was just very independent-minded and very, very clever. I remember once I had described India as the world's most populous democracy, and she immediately shot back saying, you mean the world's most overpopulated democracy? She was very witty. And she moved on from the think tank, from being the head of the think tank, to being a media analyst and commentator. And then she moved into politics with Imran. And now she's Pakistan's foreign minister. I'll tell you one thing. Pakistan always had an excellent foreign service, superb think tanks, very impressive foreign ministers. But this is one person, together with Imran Khan, who's really going to put Pakistan on the map. Nobody can talk down to her. She's a brilliant, fiercely brilliant intellect, very articulate. She's really going to light up South Asia with her outspoken views and her intellect. So I'm very happy that somebody whom Honorable Lakshman Kadirkama put me in touch with, is now the Foreign Minister of Pakistan under this very progressive Imran Khan administration.
So it seems that Imran Khan, the new Prime Minister of Pakistan, is playing his cards right and appointing
very well
those who are qualified and more suitable to the positions that are in government, especially in cabinet. And hopefully one day Sri Lanka too will see such a wise decision being made. Thank you, Doctor, for joining us this evening on Vantage Point.
Thank you, Zulfiq.
And thank you for our viewers for joining us tonight on the 5th anniversary show of Vantage Point. Good night.